Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for your patience getting into the webinar. For those of you who have joined, if you do see that your name says Dr. Zhu Yang, you can change that by clicking the three dots at the top of your video camera and hitting rename. So you can do that if you'd like. But I'm very excited to welcome you all to our third Bipin and Rekha Shah Plant-Based Food and Nutrition Distinguished Lecture Series. This series is put on by the Nutrition and Food Science Department at the Huntley College of Agriculture at Cal Poly Pomona. And we're excited because we're bringing you today's presentation by the Plant-Powered Dietitian, Sharon Palmer. We've had the pleasure of hosting other plant-based experts in plant-based living, and we've now had lectures on how the health benefits of plant-based eating can benefit every human being, as well as how the benefits of plant-based eating can be essential to reduce climate change. So today we're going to focus more on the practical applications of plant-based eating. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Harmit Singh, who's the chair of our Nutrition and Food Science Department and the director of our plant-based program here at Cal Poly. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Singh.
Thank you so much, Colleen. First of all, I want to thank you. Dr. Colleen is our assistant professor, and Dr. Yang is also assistant professor in our department, helping me to organize this. I really appreciate all your help in the background and the front end also, and even figuring out the speakers. So thank you so much to both of you. I want to thank our sponsor and supporter, Mr. Bipin Shah and Rekha Shah, for providing us the funding and giving us moral and financial both supports during, to organize the plant-based minor and as well as this lecture series, which is really, really popular right now. So our dean, Dr. Sancho, has not joined yet. I don't see his image yet. I emailed him. If he can join, he'll say a few words. But in the meantime, I want Mr. Shah to say a few words to give his vision and how he likes this lecture series so far. Mr. Shah.
Well, as we said, this is the third lecture I think in about 15 months or so now.
Yes.
And I, by the way, I'm very, very, happy that these lectures are occurring at a higher frequency than what I had originally anticipated. And I've had the pleasure of attending all of the lectures, and what I'm about to say as to why, this series of lectures and why we support the plant-based food may sound redundant to those of you who have, attended the past lectures, but there are three reasons. So one, as a Jain, many of you may not know what Jainism as a religion is, but there's extreme emphasis on nonviolence. And so from that standpoint, as a Jain, I'm a very strict vegetarian. So from that standpoint, supporting this initiative is basically somewhat religious and ethical on our part. The second aspect is, of course, the health aspect, the health benefits of plant-based food. And, if you talk about a lot of the healthcare issues, particularly heart-related issues and so on, there's lots of emphasis on converting to plant-based diet. And the third aspect is the environmental aspect, which is, eating plant-based food. If more and more people do that, a lot of the environmental issues created by production of methane from rearing of cattle and other animals is drastically reduced, and it's good for our, earth and also the this whole climate change issue that we're talking about. So from all these perspectives, this is a very important initiative, and we're happy to be part of it. So thanks, Dr. Singh. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bipinji. Thank you so much again for supporting this. I still don't see our dean, but our dean is very supportive. I have a couple of good news before I turn it over to Dr. Isam to introduce the speaker and all that. One is I have received a grant for supporting a graduate student to work on plant-based proteins in my lab. Wow. So that's a big one. I'm going on sabbatical in fall with a company who supported us for this this grant, and I also submitted another grant to match the money which I received, so we can continue our research. And I'm going to go work with this company in India and maybe other places too, to work on plant-based proteins in fall. The other big news, which I think we can now share, we have received, if everything goes fine, actually a new food science position focused on plant-based, focus on that side. So that's a big advantage we got from this lecture series, which kind of caught the eye of the administration. And we now we're going to hire next year a professor, assistant professor on focusing on processing of plant-based food. So that's really big for us that we got these two, which is really important for us. Olam Food Ingredients is the company who gave me the money, and they are going to sponsor me for a visit to India in their company to work on plant-based proteins. I want to recognize their donation and their support to us also. Again, I think this series is really timely, and we will learn a lot. We have learned few things from previous lectures, and we are continuing kind of a series of different focuses of different speakers to give. And I'll let basically Colleen or Dr. Isam introduce the speaker, and then we will start with the lecture. You can post your questions in the chat box, and then we can answer them at the end of the lectures. So Dr. Isam, take it over.
Great, thank you. That's great news. So wonderful news for the plant-based research. And what I'm excited to do is introduce our speaker today, Sharon Palmer. She's the Plant-Powered Dietitian. Just so you know, Dr. Singh and I will be moderating. So as he mentioned, you can put your questions into the chat, and then we will save those for the end to ask Sharon. But I want to introduce Sharon, give you a little background on why she's here today. So Sharon has an award-winning career in the field of plant-based nutrition and sustainability. She is one of the most widely recognized registered dietitians in the world, particularly around plant-based eating. She's an accomplished writer, editor, blogger, author, speaker, professor, advisor, and media expert. In particular, she's gained recognition for her expertise in plant-based nutrition and sustainability. And she's authored over 1,000 articles in a variety of publications, including Better Homes and Gardens, the Oprah Magazine, and the LA Times. She published one of the original books on plant-based eating, The Plant-Powered Diet, the lifelong eating plan for achieving optimal health beginning today. And that was a huge success. And she's now published at least 2 or 3 other books along the same topic. She's currently working on her 4th book on plant-based eating, due for publication this year. She's contributed to several book chapters as well on nutrition and sustainability, and she's the nutrition editor for Today's Dietitian, an associate faculty in the Masters of Sustainable Food Systems program at Prescott College, and a nutrition consultant for several organizations such as the American Cancer Institute of Research and Old Ways, and the co-founder of Food and Planet. So we're really happy that she's here. She's highly qualified to give us these skills. Lastly, just a little bit about her. She lives in the sustainability mecca of Ojai, California, so here in SoCal, with her husband and 2 dogs. And Sharon enjoys tending her organic garden, visiting the local farmer markets, and volunteering in local environmental organizations, as well as cooking. So please check out her website. Sharon, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to get my PowerPoint started here. I'm really excited to be talking about powering nutrition with plant-based eating. And I just wanted to start with my favorite saying, and that is fall in love with plants and they will love you back. Did you know that there are 40,000 edible species of plants on the planet, and each has an amazing story? They have this ability to help nourish and heal our bodies. Sadly, we are only commercially cultivating 150 to 200 species of plants, edible plants. So we could do so much more in rediscovering these amazing plants that are part of traditional diets. So I just wanted to share a few little trends going on here. I know that plant-based eating has been around for a while. It's on the top trend list every year for the last decade, but it's continuing to trend. In fact, this year they were even using the word dominance. So now plants are really dominating the plate. So these are just a few snapshots of what just recently has come out. Like now there's plant-based seafood, more mycoprotein, mushroom proteins in foods. Experts are saying the plant-based food trend is continuing. Veggies are getting their due. The plant-based meats are still popular. So it's just as hot as ever. 24% of consumers are eating more plant protein than they did the year before. There's an estimated $140 billion market for alternative meats in the next 10 years. And then we see, of course, this rise of meat alternatives in mainstream restaurants now. Veganism is on the rise, and particularly among Gen Z, 11% now, 10% among millennials. And 2/3 of consumers say they're eating less meat. So this is part of this Flexitarian movement. So, plant-based eating has it all. And that's why we're seeing these trends. And we've just been talking a little bit about why this eating style is so powerful. It has the sustainability benefits. It has health benefits, animal welfare benefits. Plus, as we are concerned about how we're going to feed the planet, they expect we're going to have to increase food production by 70%. Plant-based eating is going to have to be part of that equation. So what are plant-based diets? Let's start with the basics. So the definition of a plant-based diet is really one that focuses on plants. So it's almost like a spectrum of plant-based diets. So the most plant-based pattern is vegan, with absolutely no animal foods. That would be no dairy, no eggs, no animal flesh. Then vegetarian, also called lacto-ovo-vegetarian, is no animal flesh, but you do allow for dairy and eggs. Pescatarian allows for seafood, fish and seafood. So it's a vegetarian plus fish and seafood. And then we have the semi-vegetarian or flexitarian, where it's small amounts of animal foods. And then when you look at this, even the Mediterranean diet is considered a plant-based diet because it is focused primarily on plant foods with small amounts of fish. And then we also have a lot of flexibility. So you'll find people who are vegetarians who don't eat dairy products, they eat eggs, or you'll find pescatarians that are vegan, but they just eat a little bit of fish. So you have a lot of individualization along this spectrum. But plants are also part of indigenous traditional diets around the world. When we see these healthy diet patterns that are linked with health benefits, we notice that they're primarily based on plants. So these are photos like of Japan, Peru, this is Sicilian tomatoes, Greece on the bottom middle, Puerto Rico. These beautiful plant foods are part of traditional diets. And a lot of times when you find these traditional diets, you see that there's a local whole grain, for example, quinoa in Peru. There's a local legume or pulse. So it could be black beans in Central America. And then there's a large amount of seasonal cultivated and foraged fruits and vegetables. And this really is the foundation of these plant-based diets, where really it's like the vegetables that can be grown in home gardens, foraged, exchanged in local markets. These are really the basis of the diet. You'll also see seeds and nuts like sesame seeds in Africa. And then they're minimally processed. We're not seeing a lot of highly processed foods and packages. They're really just minimally whole plant foods that are cooked and prepared simply. And then this low use of animal foods. So these are the diets that we know are linked with health benefits. Sadly, we have moved to the Western diet. That is a diet that we eat in the US. And it's been characterized by researchers as diets that are high in animal foods, highly processed foods, and fast foods. So consequently, they're higher in sugar and sodium and saturated fat. And they're low in all of these healthy whole plant foods like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes. So they're low in things like fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. And I had to find some pictures that exemplified the Western diet. So I found this deep fried donut bacon cheeseburger with fries and a chicken and waffles cake, just to kind of show you how far we've come from these beautiful traditional plant-based diets. So the position statement from the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics is included here on plant-based diets. So this is talking about vegetarian and vegan diets. So the official statement from the largest nutrition organization in our country says that they're healthful, they're nutritionally adequate for all stages of the life cycle, and they are linked with all sorts of benefits, such as lower heart disease, lower type 2 diabetes, hypertension, certain types of cancer, and obesity. It's because of all of those nutrients that are found in the food. So this is the official statement. So what is so great about all these whole plant foods? Well, I like to say that plants are high in all the good stuff, things like fiber and vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, phytochemicals, and low glycemic carbs. And when we talk about these things, a lot of these are unique to the plant world. So these are things that can only be found in plants for some of these particular things like phytochemicals and fiber. It's limited to those foods. But it's also low in the bad stuff. When we're eating more plant-based, we're pushing out those things that are not as healthful, that are high in saturated fat, in cholesterol, in sodium, and also toxins that we know are produced when we cook, cure, and process meat. So that is why a plant-based diet is so healthy. Now, I also wanted to point out that I'm sharing a lot of my own recipes, photos today, and I welcome you to go check out my blog and grab any recipes that you would like to try, either professionally to share with whatever groups that you're working with, or to try at home. So I want to encourage you to do that too. One of the main benefits of plant-based diets is they're filled with phytochemicals. And we know there are thousands of phytochemicals. These are compounds in plants. They're the natural defense system of the plant. They're often concentrated on the outer surface. They can be the color pigment of the plant, and they help the plant survive because it couldn't just get up and run away from predators or pests or viruses or even sun damage. It was rooted in the soil. So it's this natural defense system. And when humans eat phytochemicals and plant foods, we gain benefits. But sadly, we're falling short on these phytochemicals. I like to say we're getting our colors from things like artificially colored yogurt and cheese puffs in America. So we're really missing out on these beautiful plant foods. And in this graph here, you can see the percentage of calories in the US food consumption pattern here. So you can see 63% of our calories are coming from processed foods, which is a very sad statement. 25% from animal food, and only 12% from plant food, but it's even worse than 12% because only half of that is coming from real whole food, like fruits and vegetables and grains and pulses. The other half is coming from things like nuts and candy bars. So we have so much opportunity to promote plant-based foods in our diet. So there are lots of health benefits linked with plant-based diets. And I'm just going to touch on these because I know we've already covered this in our lecture, but I'll just briefly touch on that. First of all, longevity, because when you look at health benefits and you know that people have lower risks of chronic disease, of course, they're going to live longer. And we have lots of studies that are showing that people who eat a plant-based diet have a longer lifespan, a lower risk of dying over the study periods. Even studies that show the higher the amount of protein coming from plants, the longer the lifespan. So we have some really good evidence here that supports different types of plant-based diets, in particular, diets that adhere the closest to plant-based. So that means like the more plant-based, the better in some of these studies. We also have a lot of research on healthy weight. This is very consistent that people who eat a plant-based diet weigh less without even trying. It's just a finding. So in the EPIC study, they found that all of the plant-based diet patterns weighed less than the meat eaters. In particular, vegans weighed the less. They weighed 30 pounds less than a non-vegetarian of similar height in this one category, which is a significant finding. And here are some other studies for you to look at that, studies have shown that vegan diets are good for weight loss compared to other diet patterns. The Mediterranean diet has also been found to be good for weight loss, and even the Flexitarian diet. So we do have research, and the reason why that they're finding is the fiber. They really think it's the fiber because we know fiber has such an impact on satiety, and plant-based diets are filled with fiber. So another big finding is lower oxidative stress and inflammation. Because of all those phytochemicals, they have antioxidant properties, they have anti-inflammatory properties. So naturally, plant-based diets are going to result in lower inflammation and oxidative stress, which is the root of chronic disease. So we're seeing research now that's showing these eating patterns that are filled with more whole plant foods, and even vegetarian diets and vegan diets have been linked with lower levels of inflammation. Heart disease is one of the most common findings for benefits of plant-based diets, and we have significant research in this area consistently showing lower risks of different, like this particular study, the beginning here is talking about hospitalization or death from heart disease, 32% lower in vegetarians. In another study, 25% lower risk of ischemic heart disease. So number of studies here, and it's really coming down to lower inflammation levels, lower oxidative stress, lower blood pressure, and lower LDL levels. These are all a side effect of eating a plant-based diet, and even vascular function benefits. And then type 2 diabetes, we're getting more research here showing that the more plant-based diets are have a lower risk of even developing type 2 diabetes. And there's more research showing that diabetes management can be improved with a plant-based diet. In fact, that's what my next book is on, is plant-based for diabetes, because more and more research is showing that it's a good management tool, better insulin sensitivity, better glucose control with that plant-based diet. And lower risk of cancer. We have many studies that have shown a lower total risk of cancer, and also lower risk of breast cancer, colorectal. The AICR basically says these plant foods can help protect against many cancers: the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, lung, pancreas, prostate cancer, and digestive cancers. And then also, I love the area of the healthy gut and immune function, the gut microbiota. There's more and more work coming in about how that impacts our immune health and our digestive health, which can overall protect our health in many ways. And those gut microbiota feed on fiber. So naturally, these plant-based diets are showing to produce a more favorable gut microbiota profile. So that we're getting more and more research on plant-based diets here. So this could be another founding reason on the benefits of plant-based eating. Even brain function, we have research showing plant-based diets, again, Alzheimer's is an inflammatory process. So of course, eating a more plant-based diet is linked with lower risks of Alzheimer's. And even the 7 dietary and lifestyle guidelines that are recommended to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's, they include these 3: saturated fat, which is found primarily in animal fat, eating more plant-based foods, it actually says that, and eating more vitamin E, again, found in plant foods. Brain function, we just did that one. Okay, I want to get to Adventist Health Study 2, my alma mater, where I studied nutrition. They have really done landmark work on plant-based diets. And I know Dr. Sabate spoke recently at one of the lectures, but I just love the research they're doing where they took 96,000 adults and they divided their diets among 5 patterns: a non-vegetarian, a semi-vegetarian, pescatarian, vegetarian, and vegan. And what they found overall is that there was a linear relationship, so that you could draw a line. The more plant-based, the better. So there are benefits all along the way. So people that wanted to go from omnivore to semi-vegetarian, there were benefits, but the benefits kept going the more plant-based you got. So and this applied to things like BMI, hypertension, diabetes, cholesterol, inflammation, insulin, cancer, mortality, and even carbon footprint. So in the Adventist Health Study 2, they found that vegans had a 42% lower carbon footprint than the non-vegetarians. But even the semi-vegetarians had 20% lower, pescatarians 24% lower, and the vegetarians 28% lower. So they found all of these benefits. And this is really why there were benefits. This actually looks at what the people were eating on the Adventist Health Study 2. So if you look at the one axis, that's the non-vegetarians. And then you can see the green bar is the vegans, the yellow is the lacto-vegetarians, the blue is the pescatarians, and the red is the semi-vegetarians. So look at how much more fruit the vegans are eating, or all the plant-based eaters. Look at how many more vegetables, more avocados, more grains, more legumes, more soy foods, more nuts and seeds. So here is the beauty of a plant-based diet, because when people eat more of a plant-based diet, they're crowding out those unhealthful foods and they're eating more of these really beautiful foods linked with health. And there also is more research showing that it's not just eating a plant-based diet, it's the quality of the diet. So now we're actually teasing out the research to see what's the difference, because nowadays we can buy plant-based everything, right? You can go to the supermarket, you can see plant-based cookies, brownies, candy, whatever you want, but they're not always nutritious choices. So this Harvard study looked at 3 different diets: the overall plant-based diet that was just lower in animal food, just a general lower animal food diet, then a healthy plant-based diet, 100% plant-based, but only healthy whole plant foods, things like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes, and healthy oils. And then an unhealthy plant-based diet. So this is an unhealthy vegan diet with a lot of refined foods. And of course, guess which one did the best? Of course, it was the healthy vegan diet. But which one did the worst? Was the unhealthy vegan diet. So it did even worse than that overall plant-based diet where people were cutting back on animal food. So now we're learning it's not just vegan or not just plant-based, it's the quality of the plant-based diet. So I also wanted to touch a little bit on sustainability. I know it's been covered before, but just to really briefly, that it's so important that we think beyond our health to our planet, because how can we even talk about these things if we don't even have a safe, reliable, healthy food system for the future? 59% of consumers say they want to eat sustainably. They want to buy these foods. And, really a sustainable food system is one that we're producing foods using techniques that protect our environment, they protect our health, they protect our communities, our animals, they provide a safe, reliable food supply for the future. So research is starting to show that what we eat can be the most impactful thing we can do over our lifetimes on environmental footprint. And it's all about eating more plants, significantly reducing animal food intake to really meet these goals. And I just want to show you this really fast. This just came out recently, and it was a beautiful study on looking at the environmental footprint of different food groups. And they looked at all the environmental factors. The first column is land use. The second is water use. The third is carbon footprint. And the fourth is eutrophication, which is when we have like manure or nutrient runoff that goes into bodies of water. So when you look at the plant-based on the right, and especially compare it to the meat-based, you see significant reductions. I mean, look at legumes. If we're switching from meat to things like legumes for our food sources, it's just a fraction of those numbers. So you can really see how the impact on the environment when you look at the animal-based foods compared to the plant-based foods. So now let's get into the fun part. Let's talk about what we eat on a plant-based diet. And I wanted to share this beautiful pyramid from Old Ways. I actually helped create this pyramid, and it's really the foundation of how you plan a healthy plant-based diet. The biggest part of it is fruits and vegetables. That's really the core of the diet, this beautiful, diverse array of fruits and vegetables. Then we have our whole grains, and then we have our pulses or legumes and soy foods, nuts and seeds, herbs, spices, healthy plant fats. And then for vegetarians, moderate amounts of eggs, dairy, cheese, those kinds of things. You can find that at Old Ways. So this is my meal guide that I recommend for people who are eating 100% plant-based diet, although I do have meal guides for vegetarian and semi-vegetarian. But if you're aiming for 100% plant-based diet, these are the kinds of foods that would be filling your day. This is really that healthy plant-based diet that's linked with so many benefits. So legumes or pulses and soy foods, these are things, when we talk about legumes or pulses, we're talking about those dried beans, the lentils, the dried peas, things like black beans and black-eyed peas, chickpeas, tofu, which is made from soybeans, tempeh, which is a fermented soybean product that comes from Indonesia, seitan, which is a wheat protein, or meat alternatives, protein-rich plant-based milk alternatives. These are some of our plant proteins. And then nuts and seeds also can be rich in plant proteins. So this is really fleshing out that area. And then we have our whole grains. This also can provide important nutrients. So things like intact wheat berries, brown rice, quinoa, trying to eat as many of our intact whole grains as possible, but also allowing for things like whole grain pasta, whole grain bread, cereals, those kinds of things, tortillas. And then lots of vegetables, leafy greens. I recommend at least one leafy green every day to make sure we're getting some of the minerals we need. And then also fresh or cooked vegetables, vegetable juice, fruits, 3 to 4 servings a day. I like to recommend fruit as your dessert because then you're getting in that serving of fruit. Plus, it's just a beautiful, naturally sweet thing that we can include in our diet. Healthy fats, a moderate amount of healthy fats, and then herbs and spices. And then beverages. A lot of our health problems in the US have stemmed from beverages. We're drinking way too many sugary beverages. But really getting back to the water and plant-based things like tea and coffee, which are linked with antioxidant benefits. So I want to talk a little bit about protein because I get a ton of questions on protein. And a lot of people just feel like if you eat plant-based, you're not going to get enough protein. But indeed, that's not true. We know research shows that even vegans on average are getting enough protein. But let's just start at the basics. Proteins are made of chains of amino acids. Some we can make in our body, others we can't. And those are the essential amino acids, which include histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. So the proteins in our body exist in fairly consistent amounts of these amino acids. And this is also true for animal foods. So animal proteins have always kind of been considered complete or high quality because plant proteins may have had a lower amount of one of these amino acids. Although it's important to note that soy has a very similar amino acid profile to animal proteins, and legumes are not too far away from soy. So we do have some good sources of amino acids. All plant foods contain at least some of every essential amino acid. In general, legumes are a little lower in methionine, and then most of the other plants are a little lower in lysine. So when you eat a plant-based diet filled with a variety of foods, you generally work your way through it. So there are a lot of, there's a lot of misinformation out there about plant proteins. Do you need to balance them? You need to complete your meal. But the thought today is that if you consume a variety of these foods, you're going to get enough of your amino acids, even if you're 100% plant-based vegan diets, because the liver can store these essential amino acids, ensuring that you get adequate nitrogen retention. So you don't have to eat them all at the same meal. It's over the course of a day. It's always important to remember plants are not devoid of amino acids. It's just that they may not have as much of each of them. So it's all about that beautiful, healthy diet over the day. There is also something called a limiting amino acid. If you really get into the technical aspects of protein quality in plants, that limiting amino acid is an amino acid in shortest supply. And this is also part of determining the amino acid scoring. So in general, if you're eating 100% plant-based diet, it's only lysine that's going to probably be a concern because most of our diets are pretty high in methionine. So you don't have to worry about all the other amino acids. If you're getting enough lysine, you're good. So the recommendation is to make sure you're getting a variety of legumes and soy foods and seitan. Those are some examples of lysine sources. And then, you can meet your amino acid needs. So again, the real concern is for people who are eating most of their protein from plants. And I will see people who are vegetarians and they're almost vegans. So that you will see a lot of people that when the closer you're getting to a primarily plant-based diet, then you might want to focus more on these issues. But if you're just doing a semi-vegetarian diet or a flexitarian thing in general, you don't have to worry so much. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of research on nitrogen balance in people who eat plant-based diets. But we do know the RDA for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of healthy body weight per day. So if you take your weight, put it in kilograms and multiply by 0.8, you'll come up with your protein needs for the day. However, studies show that if you are eating primarily plant-based, you might benefit from going more to like 1.0 to 1.1 grams of per kilogram for your protein. And that really relates to digestibility because plant-based proteins are filled with fiber, and that can interfere with the digestibility just a little bit. So it's recommended to just, up your protein a little bit more. And there are also other areas, like if you're an athlete or an older adult, you might want to increase your protein a little bit there too. But in general, as I mentioned, research has shown that vegans are meeting their protein and amino acid needs. So it's really just a matter of making sure you're balancing your diet. What I recommend to get lysine is 3 to 4 servings per day of high protein foods that are good sources of lysine. So these are the foods that are part of a plant-based diet anyway. Things like legumes or pulses, I recommend those every day in a plant-based diet. Soy foods, edamame, tofu, tempeh, soy milk, soy meats. These are good sources. Nuts and seeds, peanuts, pistachios, pumpkin seeds, seitan, even quinoa. So these are all part of a healthy diet. So it's not that difficult. I also wanted to talk a little bit about this term high quality. So we see that a lot in the protein world, where we'll say animal foods are high quality protein and plant foods are low quality protein. And it's all about this whole conversation on amino acids. However, there is no regulatory term for high quality or low quality or complete protein. And it really kind of could be traced back to Frances Moore Lappé's beautiful book, Diet for a Small Planet. And in that book, she used the term complete. And it's a beautiful book, but a lot of times people started thinking that, I have to complete my plate. I've got to combine these things at the same meal. And it just added a little more stress. And then when animal sources of protein were called high quality, it made people view plant proteins in a more negative light. So there's this new discussion happening right now that we need to reframe how we're talking about protein quality, because quality is about more than just amino acids, right? What about saturated fat and sodium? Pulses are, extremely low in some of these negative things. Tofu is too, compared to an animal protein. So what does quality really mean? When we're talking about quality in proteins, we can help people realize that higher quality choices are those that promote health and environmental benefits. So what if we really reframe this whole conversation on protein quality? I think it would make a big impact on consumer perception. So these are the plant proteins. When you look at them, we've got the legumes or pulses. You might hear pulses interchangeably with legumes, but pulses are really the subcategory of legumes. Legumes includes a larger category, so you can use either term, but we're looking at these dried beans, lentils, and peas, which are rich in protein. According to the USDA, 1/4 cup counts for 1 ounce of meat equivalent. So they're also so rich in so many other nutrients, high in fiber, the fiber king and queens, and also minerals and vitamins, many things important for our diets. Whole soy foods. And when I talk about whole soy foods, I promote more of the minimally processed things like tofu, which is basically, if you've ever seen how tofu is made, it's just basically ground soybeans, filtered with water, and then coagulated. Soy milk it basically turns into soy milk, which is then coagulated. So I consider that a minimally processed food. Tempeh, a beautiful plant-based traditional food that is fermented. So these are rich in protein. And then all of these nuts and nut butter, some of them have higher protein levels than others. The ones that are really the protein stars are almonds, pistachios, and peanuts are not really a nut in a true sense. They're actually a legume, but we kind of throw them into the nut category because nutritionally they're more like a nut. Those are protein superstars. Seeds and seed butters can be good sources of protein. So the nuts and seeds can actually count as a fat, a healthy fat, and a protein. And then we have the whole grains. Even though they're technically not in the protein group, they are good sources of protein. They can have up to 11 grams protein per cup of cooked grains. So they contribute a lot of protein. So when you're looking at the plant-based diet, sure, you have your protein sources, but you're also getting protein in things like those whole grains and also the vegetables. Some vegetables can contain up to 6 grams of protein per cup. So all of that is adding protein, and that is why a healthy plant-based diet that's well-balanced is going to meet your protein needs. So this is kind of a repeat of the servings that I recommend. And I recommend a range of servings because we all have our own energy needs. Some of us need more energy than the others. So there's kind of this spectrum of energy. So 3 to 5 servings of legumes and soy foods. So this could be a half a cup of cooked beans, lentils, dried peas, tofu, tempeh, seitan, or a meat alternative, or 1 cup of a protein-rich plant-based milk alternative. And I wanted to just kind of remind everybody there's a lot of plant-based milk alternatives out there that are low in protein and low in nutrients. So I recommend soy as the #1 choice because it's got the highest protein intake. Now we are finding milk alternatives that have additional protein added to them. So that can help increase your protein intake. But you've got to really look at that. In fact, there have been many statements come out, especially among children, to make sure you're getting a nutrient-rich milk alternative. And then I'm recommending nuts and seeds, about 2 servings a day. And this is really for people who are eating a 100% plant-based diet. And then if you're working your way to plant-based, you can look at this as a guide too. Whole grains, depending on your energy needs, anywhere from 5 to 11 servings. This is just a half a cup of cooked intact grains or pasta, a slice of bread, a cup of ready-to-eat cereal. These are, a small corn tortilla. These are some of the healthy whole grains. And these foods provide so many of our minerals, our vitamins, also fiber and protein. And then vegetables. This is really that foundation. So many studies show that increase in vegetables is one of the best things we could do for our diets. They're low in energy, high in fiber, packed with antioxidant compounds, anti-inflammatory compounds. And these are just a half a cup of cooked vegetables is generally a serving, or a cup of raw leafy vegetables is generally a serving. So 6 servings a day is what I recommend as a minimum. And what I like to do is recommend that you can even include vegetables for breakfast sometimes, not every day, but more often. You can put them in your smoothies. And it's just don't stop at one vegetable. Have a salad and a cooked vegetable, a salad and a soup. Put vegetables in your entree. Have a big portion. If you have a salad like this, you could have 3 servings of vegetables in there, depending on your portion size. So really think about the diversity and getting those vegetables up there. And then fruits. As I said, about anywhere from 3 to 4 servings a day. And this is your natural dessert. And it's just a small serving, but I try to recommend seasonality, to eat with the seasons for fruits and vegetables as part of a sustainable diet. And these, of course, are packed with antioxidant compounds, anti-inflammatories, lots of vitamins, fiber, so important in our diets. And then healthy fats. One of the beauties of a plant-based diet is that it's promoting healthy fats. A lot of the unhealthy saturated fats are coming from the animal world. So plant-based fats, things like olive oil, nuts, avocados, olives, these are healthy unsaturated fats. The only area would be your tropical fats, things like coconut and palm kernel oil, palm oil. They have more saturated fat. So I recommend those in more moderate amounts. But you have to remember that a plant-based diet is very low in saturated fat. So there is room for some of these things like the coconut, as long as it's not, in excess. And then herbs and spices. One of the beauties of a diet filled with herbs and spices is that it's full of flavor. Of course, they're concentrated sources of phytochemicals, but you can reduce your sodium in your diet, and it's delicious. It's colorful. It's fragrant. We're just making our food so delicious when we really add more herbs and spices. So use them liberally. And then beverages, I mentioned before, focusing on water, unsweetened tea or coffee. These are the beverages of choice. This is also more sustainable. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the nutrients of concern. If you're eating 100% plant-based diet or almost 100% plant-based diet, one concern could be calcium. So I've listed the RDA here, and what I recommend is aim for 2 or 3 servings a day of calcium-rich foods. And these are some calcium-rich foods here. Tofu processed with calcium can be a good source. Your plant-based milk, look for the calcium intake there. Even blackstrap molasses, which is delicious over oats. Tempeh, your green vegetables, your cruciferous vegetables, even some of the beans. So these, when you really look at this, and you're going to see some of the other nutrients, when you go back to what I was talking about, eating those whole grains, eating those pulses, your soy foods, your vegetables, you can see that you can fit them in when you start eating these foods every day. And if you are having, if you're really not achieving that goal, what I recommend is just a small supplement. You don't need the whole 1,000 milligrams if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet. Maybe 500 milligrams just to supplement your diet might be something you would consider, discuss with your physician. And then zinc. Now, it's possible to get enough zinc on a completely plant-based diet because it's found in all these beautiful foods that should be part of your diet: tofu, nuts, grains, pulses. This is, the foundation of a plant-based diet. However, the thing is that zinc is not as bioavailable in plant-based form. So you may need more of that food source. However, it can become more bioavailable when you sprout or soak. We know we soak our beans and you can even soak your grains and then start with fresh water. When you leaven things, your grains, it increases bioavailability too. Sprouting has been shown to increase bioavailability. Again, if it's a concern, you can consider it as a supplementation. What I recommend, if you are going to supplement on a plant-based diet, is to take nutrients that you need, only the ones you need, because a plant-based diet can be really high in things like vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E. So there's no need to supplement the whole thing. But if it is part of your daily pattern, then you can make sure there's zinc in there. Iron, again, you can meet your iron needs on a plant-based diet. These are some good food sources here. Very similar things, right? When you look at this is the foundation of a healthy plant-based diet. Grains, pulses, green leafy vegetables, tofu, these are all part of that beautiful plant-based diet that should be regularly on the plate. So you can meet your needs. Vitamin C enhances your absorption. So that's the one thing to keep in mind, is plant-based calcium is not quite as bioavailable, but when you have vitamin C present at that meal, you can increase your absorption. So when you eat a plant-based diet, you're going to have vitamin C, right? You're going to have vegetables, you're going to have fruit for dessert, you're going to have these things. So that will help as well. And again, if you are doing a supplement, you could see about having iron on your supplement. Vitamin D, in the US, all of us are falling short on vitamin D levels. So it's not just a problem for plant-based eaters. We're all falling short since the industrial revolution. We're indoors, we're not getting the sun exposure because this is the sunshine vitamin. We can get it through, in our skins by exposure to the sunlight. And mushrooms can do the same thing. So you may see mushrooms that have vitamin D. It's because when mushrooms are exposed to the light, they can make vitamin D. So you can get it from fortified foods. I recommend some moderate sun exposure, and you could also consider a vitamin D in your supplement. And then B12. This is the one nutrient that you have to supplement if you're eating in an entirely plant-based diet or even a mostly plant-based diet. There's just no ands and ifs about it. You have to supplement it. You have to have regular supplementation. So, some people, you could get it through fortified foods. These sources here are fortified with vitamin B12. But if you're going to do it that way, you have to be very regular about getting those every single day. So I would prefer to see a supplement because then there's some regular balance of that in the diet. So even though the RDA is 2.4 micrograms per day, the recommendation is higher than that because the absorption is so low in supplements. So what a lot of experts are recommending is 250 micrograms per day. Now you can do that in 2 doses during the week. There's a lot of 1,000 microgram B12 supplements that you could just do it fewer times, but that's the recommendation. Iodine has come up as something that's a little more of concern, although we need a lot more research on this. And we do have iodine in fruits and vegetables, but the amounts depend on the soil that they are grown in. So it's really hard to know how much iodine you're getting there. You can get it in salt, iodized salt, but a lot of us are using sea salt now, or the salt that's in food products is often uniodized. You could consider it to be part of your supplementation. But one thing to keep in mind is seaweed is a really good source of iodine, but it can be a lot of iodine. You could get too much iodine. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have a moderate amount of seaweed, that's a great source of iodine, but you also want to keep track if you're going way, way high there. So that's really, looking at the nutrients of concern, those are the ones that you have to pay attention. It's completely possible to meet your needs on a plant-based diet, but you have to make sure you're paying attention to those particular areas. Now I wanted to talk about how to put this together into a delicious, healthy meal. So these are, the main tenets of eating delicious food is color, texture, and flavor. And plants have those all. So this is a red lentil stew. I mean, just think of how much color is in plant foods. That's where we get our colors, right? And then texture, we have so many textures that come from plants. Like these beans are crunchy on the outside and they're soft and creamy on the inside. And then flavor, all of the flavors, the herbs, the spices, these are all plant-based ingredients. So this is really the way we make our food delicious and beautiful. And I wanted to just leave you with my tips for eating a more plant-based diet. Even if you're not ready to just go all the way to 100% plant-based, we can make gradual changes. We can start the day right by eating plant-based for breakfast. Meatless Monday is a great program that helps, just by going plant-based 1 day a week. And then reframing how you think about plants. Think about the plate as starting with the plants rather than the animal foods. If you do use meat, just use it as a seasoning like we see in so many food cultures. Really get your plant-based pantry going so you have these foods available, things like beans and whole grains. Get cooking new recipes. Just once a week, try a new recipe. And remember, it can be simple. It doesn't have to be a complicated meal. It can be just something like a hummus pita. a global food, has so many beautiful flavors, and that's a great inspiration. And start with your favorite dishes. For example, if you have a lasagna, go there, start making a plant-based lasagna. Try slow cookers, get more acquainted with alternative dairy products. And finally, think yes, because it's not what you can't have, it's about what you can have. Those 40,000 edible plant species, there's just so much variety. So I wanted to leave you there, and thank you very much. And I think we have some questions. Time for some questions.
Yes, I will start. We have several questions. We saw a hand raised. We'll see. Let's start with some of the questions in the chat, and then we can come back to some questions, maybe if we have time for that. Thank you, Colleen, for organizing these questions for me. Thank you so much, Sharon, first of all. Wonderful presentation. Thank you for collecting all the informations. It was really great to hear that. A lot of questions are still there in my mind also, but I think many of them will be covered by the questions. The first one is, does the 1 to 1.1 gram per kilogram plant protein work for teen athletes or higher?
Well, the thought is that if you're eating 100% plant-based, in order to account for digestibility, that you should add a little bit more, like a factor of about 0.2. So that brings you up to about 1. So that's the general thought. Now, and that would cover the life cycle. The only thing for athletes, I would suggest even more. So some, depending, like I think if you're working with on an individual basis, you could look at your protein needs, but you have some experts that are going 1.2 and even higher for athletes, depending on the type of athletics. And then older adults, if they have, muscle wasting, there's a thought to have it a little higher too. But that's the expert consensus on that.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, how great of a difference does the quality of meat and dairy have on one's health? Did the study that were reviewed discuss the difference, high versus low quality? So
high or low quality dairy? Is that what the question was?
That's what I think. How great of a difference does the quality of meat and dairy have on one's health?
Well, if I understand that correctly, if they're talking, I mean, there is research, for example, on organic milk versus conventional milk, and there is higher omega-3 intake related, and even with pasture raised versus conventional raised. So if that was what the question, there is some research showing that there's favorable, benefits there. However, all of this body of research shows that regardless, even though the quality could be slightly better, these benefits are being seen with the plant-based diet that are very consistent.
Great, thank you. And I think a couple of questions we have from Mr. Shah. One is, what about consuming plain yogurt if you are a strict vegetarian? It could mean that should one add yogurt for other health benefits if one is vegan?
This is where it's a great question. And this is where a lot of variability, and I like to tell people that you have to make your own goals. If you want to start with flexitarian or meatless Monday and just work your way and find your own personal goals. So, I meet vegans all the time who are vegetarians when they travel, or they're vegans, but they have one animal, like maybe they eat eggs from their neighbor because their neighbor has their own eggs, So it's a very personal choice. When we look at the research, we have these buckets of diet patterns that people have followed. We know that yogurt has those fermented benefits, right? The probiotic benefits. Now, you can find cultured plant-based yogurt now too. We don't have a lot of research on it, but so I can understand why, somebody might want to include that yogurt in their plant-based diet. And I think it's a personal choice. We do see benefits from the probiotic effect.
Thank you. And another question from Mr. Shah is, how many minutes of sun exposure is recommended for vitamin D per day?
So you're going to see different recommendations because if too much raises our risks for skin cancer, right? So we don't want too much. So you'll see different recommendations. I see recommendations of about 5 to 20 minutes twice a week, but you have to make sure a portion of your body is exposed. If you're all bundled up and you have sunscreen on, it's not going to work. But, to have a decent amount of your body exposed and live in an area, of course, California, we're lucky. If you live in an area with poor sun exposure, that's difficult to get. But that's what I think is a good recommendation.
Okay, I will just make for the change. The call in user, I don't see the name. Victor, can you the person?
I think all of you guys are
ask
able
a
to
question.
unmute. Yeah, I think all of you guys can unmute yourself.
Yeah, go ahead. I see your hand raised. Can you ask the question? I want to get an opportunity to this person.
Can you hear me?
Please? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the lecture. Thank you, Mr. Patel and Hardeep Singh for organizing this. Extremely useful for modern world. And thank you, Sharon, for sharing your thoughts. I have a question on a couple of questions, in fact, clarification. The lifespan in Japan, Korea, and China, men and women, seems to be much higher on average, and they are not strictly plant-based, although, but they are more calorie constrained. They emphasize calorie constraints. Secondly, among nutrition, there's a consensus on vegetables. Yes, it's a great thing. On fruits, especially for diabetes too, there's some, discussions whether that's true or not. So can you please throw some more light on this? Thank you so much.
That's a great question. I spent time in Japan, and indeed, at the time I was there, they had the highest longevity of any developed nation. And the traditional, I've written about the traditional Japanese diet as a plant-based diet. It's almost like a pescatarian diet because traditionally dairy products were not part of the Japanese foodway, although it's been introduced more recently. And it was mostly seafood was the number one animal protein, and tofu. They eat a high level of tofu, and they have lower rates of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and they also drink a large amount of green tea, and that's protective. So they lots of vegetables, and fermented foods. So all of these things we know are healthful. They definitely have a healthy diet pattern. And I think that's important to note that, the blue zones highlighted that there are all different types of plant-based patterns. In the areas they found with people live the longest, Loma Linda was one of them, where they eat a high rate of vegetarianism. But in Japan, it was a very plant-based diet, and meat was almost used as a seasoning. So, in other cultures, they found that same thing in Greece and Costa Rica, in Italy. Even though they weren't exclusively plant-based, it was very low in animal food intake, high in pulses and beans and legumes. So I think now in terms of the fruit, when it comes to diabetes and you're, dealing with managing type 1 diabetes, where you have to really look at that glucose, could be a different factor. Although if you look at the work from PCRM, they've actually done work on diabetes management and published it that showed that they don't even count carbs, and patients are managing their diabetes better on a completely plant-based diet without counting carbs. So that is really interesting work. And I think we need to learn more because a plant-based diet is higher in carbohydrates. So, and when you're dealing with insulin management, that's a whole nother thing, or glucose management.
Thank you so much for your insight into that, Sharon. I'll quickly go over a few other questions. We have a list of them. I think we will not be able to cover all, but how do you feel about fake meats being really processed?
That's a great question. I get that all the time. And because we have so many new fake meats out there right now, and I think it's been great because it's appealing to people who normally wouldn't even give plant-based eating a try. Like they're trying these Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, So I feel like it's an entryway to eating more plant-based. Of course, they're not as healthy as eating beans and lentils and chickpeas and whole grains and vegetables. But if it helps people get in the door and open their minds to eating more plant-based, I think that's great. But when you look at sheer nutrients, many of them are very similar to animal foods. Like they have more saturated fat, more sodium. However, they don't have all of those compounds found in red meat. We know now like heme iron is an issue, TMAOs, like all of these compounds we know that are in red meat. The meat alternatives do not have those, and they're more sustainable too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are produced from the other crops which we can regenerate or takes less energy from the planet. The next question is hi, my partner and I need help with our vegan and vegetarian diets. We are stuck in a cycle of unhealthy plant-based diet and have gained a lot of weight. What helps in the breaking out of it?
That is also a good question. Even though the research shows that vegans or plant-based diet, they weigh less, that doesn't mean that it's an automatic weight loss for everybody. We all have our individual metabolic needs, and there are a lot of people that it's not automatically weight loss. And there's so many delicious food products out there, or like even junk food products that are vegan. So one of the things, I actually have a great blog on vegan weight loss tips, but if you want to check it out. But one of the things that people may do is like their portion sizes, because even though the foods are generally lower in calories, like fats are more dense. So if you're overdoing like nut butters and avocados and olive oil, just being more moderate with that, being more mindful with your portion sizes and looking at all of those. Like, for example, now there's vegan ice creams. They have just as many calories as conventional ice cream. So just because it's vegan does not mean it's healthy. Getting more back to the vegetables, the fruits, and portion control.
Yes, I think you covered the next question I was going to ask you. Is there any involvement with how the plant-based milk is made to be quality and not actually making it high in added fats and sugars? So
Plant-based milks, is that what the question was?
Yes.
Yeah, what I recommend for plant-based milks is to, number one, look for a nutritious one with protein. I'd like to see at least 7 grams of protein per serving. And then also to look for those that have no added sugars, no added salts, no flavors, just plain and simple. That's what I recommend. And there are many that are available. You just have to look for them. Look at the label.
Oh, thank you so much. And next question, I'll continue as much as we can to shortly address as much as we can. You mentioned to get lysine. Can you remind what foods are good sources of lysine?
Yeah, basically it's the soy foods, things like tofu, tempeh, soybeans, and then also legumes, dried beans, lentils, dried peas, chickpeas, those, and then even seitan, which is a wheat protein, and even quinoa, and also nuts and seeds. Many of the nuts and seeds are good sources. So you don't have to overthink it too much, because these are all things we should be eating, right? I mean, what else are you eating on a plant-based diet? You're eating tofu and beans and nuts, right? And grains. So making sure I just try to tell people, make sure your plate has at least one protein source. If you're trying to get those 3 to 5 protein sources per day, every meal, at least a protein source, your snacks, a protein source, making sure you do that, you should be okay.
I'll ask this question because it's for my friend, otherwise he'll kill me probably. Which plant-based diet is good for source of muscle building?
Muscle building.
Yeah.
Well, that, usually we're looking at protein, making sure we get enough protein. And I have talked to, there are so many athletes now that are plant-based. There's Tori Washington is a vegan bodybuilder. And I've talked to him before, and they just have to make sure they get enough protein. And that can be challenging, especially it's easy if you're going to be incorporating like a smoothie. You can get plant protein powders to add additional protein to supplement your diet. But some people are trying to do this with all whole foods. So they're eating enormous amounts of beans and tofu and nuts and peanuts during their day.
Next question quickly is about ashwagandha. I know it's a functional food kind of category, but what is this new supplement ashwagandha about?
Well, there are research studies out. It's very popular right now. It's like having its moment, and it's been called an adaptogen. It helps with things like stress and symptoms of these. And there is some research. I feel like we need more research on it. I haven't read any, and maybe I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but I haven't read about any negative side effects in moderation that I'm aware of. I don't know if you have noticed any, but when it comes to all these botanicals, I do think that they can provide benefits, but also keep in mind that you need to make sure you have a reputable manufacturer that you're using, because they're not regulated in the same way that other drugs are regulated. So reputable manufacturer, and no all over promising. It's not going to cure everything, but they can be beneficial. I think that botanicals, like for example, chamomile has research on anxiety benefits, and lavender does. Valerian has been linked with sleep aids, melatonin. We do know that some of these can be beneficial.
Now, coming from, I think I can supplement on that question, is that coming from, especially from Indian background, I came from our ancestors or grandparents, they used a lot of these herbal products which were known to have, and they still are really popular among our community. Slowly, turmeric and ashwagandha and some others, they are becoming mainstream in Western culture now. They are finding those beneficial. But yeah, they are added as a spice or some specific purpose for that. Like hot milk and turmeric is very popular in India since I was a child for helping in cold.
Yeah.
Improving the immunity. Ashwagandha is the same thing. These are things which are already, we knew about it, and now we are kind of rediscovering them. So those things are all there, which can be included, and as we know more, we can do more of that.
Yeah.
I have a question from my side now.
Sure.
Fast food chains, now they are getting to that, but what do you see how they can help in promoting vegetarian or these plant-based diets?
Well, it's interesting because I think we see this wave of fast food restaurants that are offering plant-based options. They wouldn't be doing it unless it's successful, right? I mean, there's an audience for it. So in my mind, it's not like these items are healthy. I mean, they're doing like deep fried chicken, like faux chicken, and these new age meats that maybe aren't as healthy, and they're not served in a really healthy way. But what I do think it's great as an option. It's more plant-based eating, especially like when you're on a road trip. Sometimes you just are, if you're eating a plant-based diet, you have so few options. And it just, to me, it makes it more mainstream. It's getting more popular to be plant-based, because at the end of the day, we have to reduce our meat consumption. Experts are calling for 50% reduction. And how are we going to do that? I mean, if the fast food restaurants make it more mainstream, I'm all for that.
Yes, I think that is going to be the key turning when people, I think the recipes in Indian or other cultures, they are all there. They need to bring them into, like lentils. We make lentils in India for several ways. We have recipes for them. We have a lot of vegetarian recipes which are available. And I think training people who are trying to get into plant-based food with the cooking style can help them to kind of have variety of plant-based, different kinds of, So taste, as a food scientist, we know taste is the number one thing why people consume things again and again.
Yeah.
So if you really want to promote something, then it has to be tasty. There should be a variety of things. I don't like to even go and have just a ball of salad all the time when I'm traveling.
Yeah.
I want a variety of things.
Right.
So we need to bring that slowly into training, cooking at home, as well as for the restaurants or for main chain restaurants, food chains, fast food chains, even having those kind of options available for us there. Sangeeta, you are the last one. I think we took a lot of time. Go ahead.
I just want to just step in and then just add to Dr. Singh's saying. First of all, so good to have you, Sharon, here. And, I know you for longest time. And excellent presentation. When it comes to those like a maid or these, certainly I strongly believe that those are not needed because we use beans and legumes and with so much of diversity. And we understand the benefits of the herbs and spices. Anybody has slow cooker, anybody has instant pot, just make a good combination of plant-based food and drop your herbs and spices. Trust me, you won't go wrong. So it's just about quick recipes. And I believe it's an excellent idea to come up with. And I would highly say that please don't go those artificial fake plant-based things because they will create more damage than the benefits. Your plant-based diet can be absolutely protein-rich and without any artificial meat or plant-based fake meat.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for wonderful
I always
presentation.
tell people, thank you so much. And I always tell people, the beauty of the plant-based diet is those simple foods. And people will say, oh, but it's going to be so hard. I don't know how to cook. And it's like, it doesn't have to be, like you said, you just drop it in a slow cooker, some lentils. Lentils don't need soaking. Cook up in 15 minutes, and it's that simple, beautiful, colorful, delicious food that's at the heart of the benefits.
Thank you so much. Colleen, did we miss anything? We still have Sharon. We are holding her. If we want to ask any questions.
Yeah, we covered everything. So Sharon, thank you for staying. Thank you folks who have still stayed, and we will be able to post the recording. There were many requests for your blog, Sharon. So I put the link in the chat to your website as well. Everyone, after the presentation ends, you will receive an evaluation. We'd love your feedback on that. We'd love your feedback for future plant-based lecture series topics as well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Dr. Singh, Dr. Yang, and Mr. Bipin Shah again for hosting this. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon. We'll see you for the next lecture series in the fall.